with Roberts, and I'm here to share my tips for creating your dream New York City townhouse. So when you're starting your own townhouse, start with what you've got and assess what came with the building. A number of things you want to think about are ceiling height, natural light, architectural detail, but also you might have some constraints, like if the building is in a landmark district, it's important to understand the rules. In our West 11th townhouse, the building was most definitely landmarked. It's in the Greenwich Village Historic District, and it was built in 1842. So even though a lot had changed since 1842, we have to look at the original building and work with landmarks in terms of bringing it back to its former glory. So Landmarks had a great collection of the original home, and that really helped us determine all the restoration that we were going to need to do in order to get Landmarks approval. But we also really like to know the stories of what's happened in these buildings. The natural light, a lot of that is going to come with just the siting of the building in terms of, are you facing south? Are you facing north? How many large buildings are directly behind you or in front of you? But also just the structure of the building. How tall are the ceilings? How wide is your frontage? So at our West 11th townhouse, we had some really interesting features, including a sawtooth skylight, some really tall ceilings, a south-facing rear of the building, and then we also had a lot of things that needed repair. With that north-facing large skylight on the top of the building, it really helped us decide that that should be perhaps the primary bedroom and not a kid's room, for instance. The facade of the house had been painted, and we had to do a lot of work to restore the brick. Also, the amount of engineering that we did to open up the large windows on the parlor level and the garden level required that we needed to reinstate new brick. And we had many choices, and we chose to go with something that matched the existing perfectly. Tip number 2 is define your priorities. So how does the family want to live in the house? You know, where's the heart of your home? So at our West 11th Street townhouse, the client really wanted the kitchen to be the kind of hub of all the activity. And so it was obvious that we were going to put the kitchen on the parlor level where guests enter, where everyone enters every day. But in some other projects, clients want a larger kitchen that isn't in the middle of the entertaining space. And at the West 11th Street townhouse, we decided to put their primary bedroom on the top level. It's kind of unusual, but for this family and with this architecture, it made the most sense to put the primary level on the top. Again, we have that skylight, and it lent itself really well to the way that that family wanted to live. Oftentimes, we need to help our clients define their program, define their priorities. Sometimes it's not obvious to them. And so we'll oftentimes just try to understand the way they live now. Where are their favorite places in the house? How do they entertain? What sort of quiet do they require, and what sort of activity do they want? You know, where do they sit together? Is there a loud television? Is there a lot of music? Do they want to eat in the kitchen? And we'll really guide them through a conversation, but we'll also oftentimes visit their current home. So even if our clients don't have their program and a really clear description of how they live, we'll help them in these ways. Another key thing to think about, you have to decide how traditional versus how modern you want the home to be. And once you start understanding your preferences, we'll look at how much the architecture is going to do. So at our West 11th townhouse, most of the detail had been removed over the years, so we had to decide how much we wanted to reinstate. How do we get the blend of modern and traditional? And maybe we're not going to reinstate all the historic detail, just some of it. Typically, we try to bring in a bit of modern. We're not pure classicists. We love introducing modern details into old buildings. So typically, we will look for that blend in the architecture as well as in the interiors. So in this house, there, as I said, a lot of the detail had been stripped. However, there was some detail that remained, but that we chose not to reinstate. So the historic balusters were there, and in some projects we might take this to a woodworker and have it recreated. But because we wanted to bring in some modern elements, we chose not to recreate the balusters, but instead to do a much more modern and clean, simple stair baluster. You know, in fact, originally a lot of these townhouses didn't have wood floors. They were carpeted. The original floors would have been made of pine. They were intended to be subfloors, not exposed, and they would have been pockmarked and in poor shape. And so we often do put in new wood floors into these houses. And we get to choose, how modern is that floor gonna be? Do we want it to be decorative? Do we want it to be, you know, incredibly bright and light? And at the West 11th Street townhouse, we chose a fumed oak that is a natural occurring color. It's not a stain. It's a furniture process. And it doesn't feel incredibly new. It doesn't call attention to itself. And also on the parlor level, we chose to do a herringbone. So we took that fumed oak and we put it in this decorative pattern. If you're considering a townhouse that doesn't have a lot of existing historic detail, it can be reinstated. And equally, it can be pared back. You can remove some historic detail. It's okay. So I wouldn't base your choice of a townhouse on whether there's too much or too little historic detail. It's important to develop your own design voice. A lot of times our clients don't exactly know how to express what they're after. And many times it's really helpful to just dive into images. Sometimes we'll look at photographs of our own projects, but we'll also look at just beautiful things in the world that inspire them. So we can start with a doorknob, we can start with a window, and then oftentimes we'll add to them. And as a result, we have like a pile of imagery. We also define words. We develop words. We develop language with them to describe what they're after. If you're trying to define your design voice, it's a good idea to just start collecting things you love. In my office, I have a pile of things that I've had for 20 years, and I find that I rely on some of those objects to remind me of kind of unusual combinations. I also have, postcards that I love. I have words that I love. So that's really helpful, just to kind of collect and edit things that really feel personal. It's also really good to think about places that you stayed that you've really loved. So oftentimes those are hotel rooms for clients, but sometimes they're just environments. Sometimes it's, our clients feel best when they're outdoors, or they love quiet spaces, calm spaces. It's really good to think about that. Try to figure out where you feel good. My final tip is to develop the best possible team of experts. Of course, we need really good engineers. We need a good architect. Really good to have also an excellent contractor. We can design the best project. If it doesn't get built well, then it doesn't matter what we designed, actually. But also really good to develop a team of people around you that help you with your decision making. So whether that's your partner, your family, a really good friend, it's great to include those types of people in your process. For the professionals, for the engineers, for the contractor, it's really good to lean on your architect's expertise. It's great that your architect has worked with these experts before. And if you know of somebody that you want to work with who has not worked with your architect, that's a great way that we discover good contractors. Thanks for joining me. It was a pleasure sharing some of my tips for creating your dream townhouse with you today.